Hey man, yo kakampe.
Hello and welcome back to Conversations in Black. I'm Gerardi Quill, your host. For this last Conversation in Black for the Black History Month, we're pleased to welcome the Honourable Mr. Kaycee Madu, Minister of Justice and Solicitor General of Alberta. We'll be discussing about Black conservatives, Black Canadians' political power and political involvement, and with an emphasis on young Black Canadians' political participation. So without further ado, let us welcome Minister Madu. Minister, thank you and welcome to Conversations in Black.
Thank you so much, Jane, for having me. It is a great honor to be able to join you this afternoon. I look forward to our conversation, and congratulations to the United Black Caucus Political Action Committee for this series.
All right, thank you very much, sir. So from the get-go, let's start, because I know your background, you are a barrister, solicitor, and an attorney. So why did you choose politics as a, because we always say, like, for us here, it's not about politics, really about public service. But why did you choose electoral politics as a form of public service as opposed to doing something else?
You know, Jane, great question. And I hope that my insight provides a lot of perspective on why I do think that young Black Canadians, regardless of the province where they live in this country, needs to get involved in politics. So I had no interest, quite frankly, of putting my name forward for an elected office until I joined the public service. So I came from the public service, the provincial government, to law practice. And whilst I was in the provincial government, I realized that we do not have a voice on the political table. We do not have a voice on the policy table. You know, I worked in a role that requires me to do a lot of strategic government policy, where I get to work closely with elected leaders, with the government of the day. And it was so hard to find that the folks who have worn our shoes as Black people have a sense of the issues that we are going through are reflected on broader government policy. There was none. It was difficult to find. In the broader public service, it was difficult to find senior leaders from the Black community in the public service. So you couldn't find them in the political class, you couldn't find them in the senior public service class. How then are public policies being made that caters for the concerns and aspirations of the Black people? So I couldn't find that. When I returned to private practice, obviously, I have always believed that politics ought to proceed from a value point of view. In other words, that your value ought to inform your politics. We get politics right when we allow our values to inform our politics. I've always said it, that good politics begets good public policy. So for me in 2015, unfortunately, we had a change in political government in Alberta. And for me, that was the impetus for me to get involved. I have always been involved. So let's be clear. I picked up my first political party membership card the very first year I arrived in this country as an immigrant. Because at that point in time, I was clear about my values. I was clear about my politics. There were no confusion about my politics and my values. And so it is a desire, in a nutshell, it is a desire to make sure that strong, credible, principled Black voices are part of the political conversation in Alberta.
Mm. Yes, that's really interesting. Then to continue, just like I said, when you arrive and you got carded right away in a political party, because we hear like we have a lot of maybe young, because that's the emphasis of the conversation, young Black Canadians that might be of a conservative sensibility, if I may put it that way,
Mm-hmm.
but are a bit reluctant maybe with the conservative party or the conservative movement as a whole, because, you know, things they might hear or things they might perceive, or, you know, during the election might see with the propensity of some, you know, nativist or some nationalist, you know, language, where they feel like maybe they're not welcome, or when they hear, you know, things like old stock, new stock, whatever, they might feel a bit unease. So can you talk about why you
Yeah.
chose the conservative movement, why you chose to be a conservative, and your take and perspective as a Black Canadian conservative, so that those maybe young Black conservative of conservative sensibility can probably say, okay, maybe I might have a place within the conservative movement as well.
You know, Jane, I think you are absolutely correct. I have always said that we must not allow anyone to think for us. Even as individuals, you must think for yourself. And part of the problem we have in the Black community is that we have allowed the things we read in the media, print or electronic, the views of those with special interest, with who are what I call the political hacks. We've allowed all of those public views to shape our own thinking, rather than to take all of that. I am a big believer in listening to every single viewpoint out there. I am also a big believer in challenging, not just listening and becoming emotional, but listening and challenging every single viewpoint out there on politics, on socials, on culture, on economy. And so that is the problem where we find ourselves, where most Black Canadians are value-wise can identify with the Conservative Party, but end up not being part of the Conservative Party or not voting Conservative because of all of these things that happens around us. Not so much of what we have been able to come to. So that is why I said, Jane, that if we proceed from the point of view of allowing our values to dictate our cultural preferences, we would have gotten the foundation right. So get the foundation right, and then ask yourselves, where then do you go with the foundation? Let me give you a very typical example. When I came to this country, many folks that I know, even folks who came from where I was born and raised, whom I know, there is no chance in hell that those guys would vote other than conservative. We're voting other political parties. And when I stepped forward to say I wanted to run, it was also the members of our community who said to me that it couldn't be done. Conservative, they will never vote for you. But imagine, Jane, that if I had believed that conservatives would never vote for me, I would not be here speaking with you. Because in the riding where I am elected, even if you put together all of the Black votes in that particular constituency, I will not have won. So the riding that elected me, the lone conservative riding in Edmonton that elected me, are made up of vastly folks from Caucasian community. But if I had agreed with the people, the media, without questioning, with the voices of cynicism, of the concerns that our folks have with the Conservative Party, conservative philosophy and values and policies, not based on their own experiences, but based on the noise out there.
Mm-hmm.
I would not have run for office. I would not have joined the Conservative Party, and I would not be here as the very first Canadian Minister of Justice from the Black community. So my point is, listen to all voices, but at the end of the day, you got to make up your mind based on your own experiences, based on your values. And if you ask a typical Black person, an immigrant, now we have mainland Black Canadians who are economic or refugee immigrants. We have Caribbean Black community, and then we have the early settlers or those from the United States. But if you ask those from the mainland Black Africa, from the continent, who are mostly economic and refugee immigrants, they will tell you that in the end, you are going to walk away with this, that the reason why they don't vote Conservative is because of immigration policies. In other words, we have made ourselves a single voter issue community. I think that is the most dangerous thing we can do for ourselves, for our children, and for the growth of our community. Number two, they also rely on historical data. Oh, they say, and the historical data that cannot be backed up by fact. Or say, oh, Conservatives historically are the racist political party. But Jean, I want to challenge you and challenge our young Black population to go deep into history and ask yourselves, who are the very first Black Canadians that have been elected in this country or in your provinces? The very first. I am not talking about building up on the progress that we have made, building up on the barriers that were broken. My question to them is, who broke those barriers? Where did they come from? Which political party? And you are going to find out that each and every one of them have come from the Conservative flock. Mm-hmm. The very first Canadian, Black Canadian, to be elected member of Parliament at the federal level is Lincoln M. Alexander, the Great Link. Yeah. Link was not elected by the Liberals or the NDP or the Greens. Link was elected by a Conservative government. Mm-hmm. So it is up to us what we make out of our political success. No political party is going to hand us a political party platform. The last point I want to make on this particular point, Jean, is this. I think it's important that we understand that we have to fight for our beliefs. Mm-hmm. And that we have to build our community. If you do not get involved in the community work, if you do not get involved in the not-for-profit organizations, if you do not get involved in retail politics, we are not going to get elected. This is not job applications. This is raw footwork. If you don't build network, if you don't build bridges, we are not going to get elected. I don't care if you have the best ideas out there. The mechanism for political success, for being elected, is through elections, political participation. Lastly, racism. I talked about that a little bit. They said, oh, the Conservatives are racist. Conservatives are racist, yet they are the political party that produce the fast whether it is across the at the federal level or at the provincial level. In my province of Alberta, I was the very first African born to be elected, to be appointed Minister of the Crown in anywhere in this country. I am the first Black person to be elected. The rest before me, again, Conservative Party, until the third person, David Shepherd of the NDP. But they would want you to believe that the Conservatives are the ones that will not give you the opportunity. I'm sure you will find other examples in other provinces, Ontario, for example, Quebec, for example. You will find examples all over those places. But the preponderance of evidence doesn't support these historical accusations that Conservatives are the racist political party that will not give you a chance. And lastly, the last point I want to make on this is we came here in pursuit of opportunity. I want to speak to Black young Canadians as an immigrant. I did not come here to count bridges. I did not come here to pick up historical fights. I came here in pursuit of opportunity, to build our community and to knock down barriers. Why would we run away from a political party that aligns so much with our values, but where we have some policy disagreement that we think don't favor our community? Why should we run away? I say we fight. I say we go in and we fight. If Kaycee hadn't gone in and fought from the inside, I would not have been elected. I would not be the very first Black Canadian Minister of Justice and Solicitor General.
Indeed. Well, that's a good thing. You go in and you fight. So then to continue on that, when you have a young Black Canadian, you know, he's saying, this is my country as well. I want to run, but the process itself, right? We see sometimes you're not given a, let's say, a favorable ward or constituency to run into, or, for example, a constituency that have been, let's say, historically for the NDP or the Liberal, and you have mostly putting Black candidates there because, you know, the battle is just harder, right? Because when you look at the voting dates and stuff, usually we have historical Conservative or Liberal NDP constituencies, and it's really hard. Maybe once now and then in the election you get an upset, but usually it stays pretty stable. So what do you say to a young Black Canadian who wants to raise his profile? You know, he doesn't know anyone, you know, he's not carded into a party, anything, but he wants to run. So what's the mechanism? How can he go about it? Can you just give us maybe a blueprint or a map to follow, how to raise his profile within the community? So just how to do it.
You know, at the end of the day, that is the crux of the issue. That is really at the heart of how do we break that political barrier. And I am going to once again use myself as an example. Remember, I said to you a few moments ago, I picked up my first party membership the very first year I arrived in this country. If you, as a young Black Canadian, have a desire to someday run for office, you must solve the crisis of political family. Number one, you must make up your mind whether you are a conservative or a liberal, and then ask yourself what shade of liberal is that? Because within that liberal family, you have the NDP, you have the Green, you have the actual Liberal Party that is very similar to the Democrats in the United States. Number two is get involved in your community where you live. If you live in a particular community, that community has to know who you are. So be involved early on in your community. That was exactly what I did. And it doesn't matter whether or not ultimately that's where you're going to run, because people move houses.
Mm-hmm.
Like where I started off, where I did most of my community work, was not where I ended up running. By the time I was thinking about running, there was a need for me to move for other reasons other than political, for family reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved to a new community, but I had built most of my community work in a different community. But guess what? Those are the things you can refer to in your background, in your body of work. And the people in your new community will see from your previous body of work in your previous community what type of person that you are. Mm-hmm. Number two, participate in the elections and campaigns of local candidates that you support, that you want to vote for. In other words, volunteer your time. Mm-hmm. If you have $5, $10, $20 to donate, do that. Let your name be seen. You know, quite in private, political leaders do actually go through political donations. Mm-hmm. And they go to the list of volunteers. Do all of that. Attend the political party AGMs. Sometimes it costs money, $20 to register to attend it, but this has happened once in a year. You know, maybe an additional 1.5 days of hotel expenditures. But that's where you network. That's where you get to see the local political grassroots, the activists, those who are going to fight for you on the ground when you decide to run. You must know the political operatives within a particular political party. You don't get to see them at your workplaces. You don't get to see them in school sometimes. You get to see them at political gatherings. Network. So professional networking, political networking, and all of those things take place at political conventions, AGMs, and constituency association meetings. Mm-hmm. And again, making sure that you are seen in the political landscape by participating in political campaigns, by donating, by giving of your time, and all of those things would really prepare you for when it is time for you to run. So those were, the things that I did for myself, that if I look back right now and ask myself, what were some of the early things that I did that helped my profile in the community? Lastly, on your point of the difficulty of a particular riding, whether or not that is a place where you can win, I would say this. If the party realizes that you've got something to offer, they've got value to value, they are going, unknown to you, they are going to be thinking hard enough, even without you knowing it, as to where they think you are going to be successful. Mm-hmm. I would also say this, that if the goal is only to get elected without doing the work, then we are mistaken. Mm-hmm. The thing I hate the most in my life is blind ambition. Blind ambition that is not backed up by some substantive work or seriousness. I want every Black child out there to dream big. But there comes a time when you now have a responsibility to implement those dreams. And those comes with accountability. They have to be backed up by action. So I would say this, if you make yourself a valuable member of the community, even when the riding is not a riding or constituency that vote for your kind of politics, you are going to make progress. And even if you lose the first time, your community is going to take note. Your party is going to take note. You never can tell when the perfect opportunity will arise. But what it does mean is that when it does arrive, you will be prepared. I am the only, there are 22 seats. No, there are 20 seats in all of Edmonton. 20 legislative seats in all of Edmonton, Jane. The NDP won 19 out of 20. The lone conservative seat in all of the city of Edmonton was won by me, the one I occupy. Mm-hmm. So how did the young black guy, unknown in the political landscape in Alberta until 2019, mm-hmm. won in a riding where, again, all of the black vote there would not have enabled me to win. Mm-hmm. But there are constituencies in Edmonton where you have a lot of black population, but we have not elected any black person in those areas. It comes down to community work and political participation.
So just to pursue with this idea of raising the profile and working, be involved in the community, but I picked up the point where you said about the solving the political crisis to determine, who are you? Are you a conservative? Are you a liberal? Whatever, you're clear on that. But what we've observed through our work is with this new brand of like the new generation, whatever, and also the most younger and then young black as well, is that they don't really identify so much with a specific movement, let's say, but they might agree with, let's say, one policy with the conservative, this policy with the liberals. So if you have a young guy with sort of not really identifying with a specific political party, but having sensibilities or policy sensibility from all of them, how can that person come about deciding exactly, like, am I really a conservative? Am I really a liberal? Or am I just an independent and just open to be convinced? But if I want to run, I still have to decide. How do I go about deciding, okay, where do I belong ideologically, politically?
Great question, Jane. You are not going to find a political party that reflects the entirety of who you are. It's impossible. That's why political parties are a big tent. They're meant to be a big tent, although there are those these days who strays on the margins. Mm-hmm. But it comes down to, at your core, what is important to you. So for me, and for the young black guy out there, if what are important to you, is it social justice? If it's social justice, do you actually know what that means? Mm-hmm. And not just what you read from the papers or what you hear from those whose life work is on social justice from a political perspective. If that is important to you, you have to determine what does that really mean to you. Is it opportunities? In other words, jobs and a functional economy, mm-hmm. which is, by the way, these two items are critically important to me. Is it family? Is it faith? Is it the education or the type of society, broadly speaking, the type of society we should and ought to build.
Mhm.
So what I would say is make a checklist and rank those things in order of priority to you. And you are absolutely correct. You are young people these days are struggling about political parties.
Mhm.
They want to focus more on things that are important to them. But those things that are important to them can be the vehicle to be used to identify their political home. So for me, jobs and economy is critically important to me, because if we were not for jobs, again, I don't think I will be here.
Mhm.
So, and for me, there's no question in my mind that the Conservative Party is a political party that wants to build strong economies, where if you want to work, willing to work, that you can find job opportunities, upward mobility, regardless of who you are. So the idea of a political party that is focused on building a strong economy is attractive to me, again, because of my own experiences. I am very much interested in family. I do think the family have got a very strong role to play in the type of societies that we build.
Mhm.
So making sure that we continue to have strong families, the idea that our children, our parents, our grandparents are important to us appeals to me. Social justice is critically important to me. The idea that we must build a society, a world in which everyone, regardless of your skin color, the sound of your mother tongue, or where you come from, ought to be respected and treated with dignity and equality. You know, Dr. King talked about the need for us not to rest until we build a beloved community.
Mhm.
The need for us to continue to strive to build a more perfect union. And all of these things are going to come by us being involved and not giving up. Because, Jane, those who came before us met unimaginable circumstances than we can ever imagine. They did not give up. I thought about the very first Black pioneers who settled in Alberta, for example. There was a guy that I love so much. I love his story, John Ware. John Ware was born into slavery in the United States, and he rode north to settle in a small town in Alberta in the late 1800s,
Mhm.
at a time when there were no Black people here in Alberta. John met unimaginable difficulties, was discriminated against. He endured all kinds of racism. But John would go on to become Alberta's most famous cowboy, Alberta's most famous rancher.
Mhm.
That when John passed away, all of southern Alberta, including Calgary, nearly everybody there attended his funeral. His funeral procession to date has been the largest in the history of Alberta, in the history of Western Canada, and I would argue in the history of this country.
Mhm.
If John did not persevere, you and I would not be here today. I often think about Violet Henry King, the very first Black woman person
Mhm.
to qualify as a lawyer in Alberta and practice law in this country.
Mhm.
If Miss King had not endured, you and I would not be here today. So I think about all of those things in the context of the need for today's Black people, and especially our younger people, to pick their fight. There is going to be all kinds of fight that you will be tempted to fight. At the same time, in life, you don't get everything you want. You have to be strategic, and you have to ask yourself what is important to you. And the voices of division, the voices of those who would want to keep the Black people down, would want us forever focus on racism and discrimination, race issues. If we fall to that, we will continue to be fighting about race and racism while the rest of the population move ahead. What I say is, Kaycee confronted racism. Jane, I don't know if you know, but my real first name is Kelechi. But you know, it was difficult for me to get an article in position using Kelechi. I had to change my name to Kaycee. Not that I did not entirely change my name to Kaycee. The Kelechis where I was born and raised in Southeast Nigeria called Kaycee, simply K.C. But it was obvious to me that my name was an obstacle at the time I was applying to article. So I had to create an European sounding name out of K.C and created Kaycee. It was not until that particular point that I began to see progress with my article and applications, and ultimately that allowed me to article. So Jean, if I had not articled, maybe at the time that I did, maybe I would not be here. So the racism is real.
Not to cut you, sir, but don't you think it's wrong if we're trying to build a beloved community or getting toward, you know, that perfect union? Don't you think that it's wrong that you have to do that to get a English sounding name to get a job? Or whereas in a beloved community, Kelechi should get an American position just with the name Kelechi?
Absolutely, Jean, you are correct. And that's why I said that we must continue to fight to build that beloved community. We have not built the work to build completely that beloved community is not done yet. So it's a work in progress. But we must then understand that barriers are still real at this point in time, and that the way to solve those barriers is not by fighting amongst ourselves on the small things. It is by confronting the big stuff. It is by building relationships and building bridges, because we are going to need allies to overcome those barriers. And despite the difficulty of me having to create a name that allowed me to article, I weighed that decision in the context of what I have achieved since being on this particular seat as the Minister of Justice. Jane, I ended the practice of cordon on November the 19th, 2020. Cordon is one of the most violent discriminatory practices that have resulted in several Black and Indigenous youth to be overrepresented in prison. I brought that cordon to an end. So if changing K.C to Kaycee is the price that I have to pay, that then allowed me to end the practice of cordon, so that young Black children are not going to end up in correctional facilities, so be it. And, you know, for the first time in the history of Law Society, we elected the very first Black bencher in the 113-year-old of the Law Society. If that is the price to pay so that we can have a Black member of the Law Society bencher, I am proud to have made that sacrifice. I appointed the very first Black person to sit on the provincial court nominating committee. The very first in the history of the committee that receives and reviews applications for the appointment of judges. They have never had a Black person before, Jane. Not one. I made that appointment December 2020. So if that is the price I have to pay to make sure that we have representation in the institutions that are going to help us build capacity and representations and help us end systemic racism or confront systemic racism from the inside. That is a price I would want to pay. So I am now reviewing the Police Act. Just yesterday, I appointed a renowned, well-qualified Black professor to be an advisor, a special advisor to the government of Alberta to help us with the review of the Police Act. The interactions between the minority communities, cultural and indigenous communities, and law enforcement continue to be a controversial one. Our community continues to cry of racism and discrimination on the part of law enforcement. Now, you have got a Black Justice Minister who is now overseeing the review of the Police Act. You have a special advisor from the Black community who is helping the bureaucrat at the Department of Justice to do that particular work. Jane, the point I'm making is, if Kaycee is not sitting on this particular seat right now, none of that would have been possible. The very first meeting that I took when I was appointed the Minister of Municipal Affairs. So I have now held 2 ministerial positions. My first appointment was the Minister of Municipal Affairs. And one of the first meetings that I took was with the Deputy Minister of Executive Council and the Public Service Commissioner, because I realized that upon being elected or appointed, there were no single Black deputy minister, no single Black assistant deputy minister, not even an executive director with the provincial government, not one, in the entire public service. And I was disturbed by that. And I had to summon a meeting with the top public servant, who is the Deputy Minister of Executive Council, and the Public Service Commissioner, and I asked them to explain this to me. And I said, you can't tell me that you couldn't find qualified Black people to hire as an executive director, as an assistant deputy minister, or a deputy minister. And I said, what is the problem? I need you guys to fix it, otherwise I'm going to go public with this, even though I'm a minister of the crown. And they went to work. And that work has resulted in a new direction to all of the HR managers within the government. And now you are going to see, as a consequence of that particular work, Black people in positions of responsibilities being able to make hiring decisions. If we don't get folks like yourself and myself in hiring decisions, that would never change. So why all of this? The point being that politics determines a lot of what happens with our institutions. We cannot solve systemic racism without Black people being involved in political leadership. If I hadn't changed my name from Kaycee, from K.C to Kaycee, maybe, again, I won't be here, Jane.
Yes. Well, that's really inspiring. So that brings us to the last question then, in terms of leadership and and mentorship. That's very important. So I just wanted you to touch on those two. Why do you think it's important for young Black Canadians to be mentored, and also to see people in leadership position, so that it can open up perspective for them, new avenues to be thinking? Because me and my former principal, who was also a Black lawyer here, we went to, it was an event, right? And I was surprised at a school where a young kid said, young Black native said, oh, she didn't know that, like, first of all, there were Black attorneys here in Manitoba, and second of all, they know that a Black person can be a lawyer. That really disturbed me. Like, still in 21st century, some kids might still have that idea. So, which means that in terms of thinking, she needs to broaden that perspective. Like, of course I can be a lawyer too. Of course I can be, because when they go to courts, there's no Black judges. So when you go, your provincial court, court appeal, whatever, just like you said, committee, very few maybe in the Department of Justice. So that brings to mentorship and leadership. What's your sort of philosophy on that, and the idea of mentoring us young folks and people even younger in terms of achieving that leadership position in our communities?
Again, excellent commentary and question. Mentorship is critical. Again, one of the reasons why I ventured into politics was, if you tune in the TV in Alberta, you would not find Black people that sounds like you, the new immigrant population. Sounds like us on TV. And the things we see on TV, we may not realize how influential those things are, but it creeps into our mentality, our worldview. It creeps into our consciousness in informing in a very subtle way that we may not be able to comprehend at that point in time, that helps inform our perceptions about life, our opportunities, our confidence, and who we are. Mm-hmm. And I was very particular in changing that. I wanted young Black children from immigrant families and communities to be able to, turn on the TV and see someone like myself, not just an artist or a community performer or a singer, but someone with considerable political power. And today in Alberta, young Black children from various immigrant communities sit in the comfort of their homes, and the TV turns on during news cycles, and they're going to see me being referred to as the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General, born and raised in Southeast Nigeria. In fact, just yesterday, the Global News ran a documentary on me. The Global News Calgary ran a document. You can Google that on Global News website. I feel free to take a look. Mm-hmm. Run a documentary about my very early beginnings in Nigeria and how I came to be, and the obstacles that I had to endure to get here. I want young Black children to watch that documentary to realize, oh my goodness, I can actually become who I want to be. I can achieve my dreams. I make it a point of duty to speak to, young Black children in schools, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, predominantly Black children in schools. And oh my God, all of a sudden they realize that we can be lawyers, we can be doctors. So mentorship, Jane, is critically important to me, and I have been doing my part, and I am prepared, to do my part. That is why, Jane, I helped, establish Association of Black Conservatives, ABC,
Mm-hmm.
And through that particular association, we build political memberships across the country. We build mentorship capacities. We build all kinds of capacities. And I think that those are some of the things that we can do to provide the required professional, social, cultural, and political mentorship to young Black people. And I am ever ready, to do more. And I hope that all of us, whether you are a lawyer, you are a doctor, you are a politician, you're a project manager, understand that we have a responsibility to mentor the young Black members of our community. So mentorship is key. And mentorship doesn't just have to come from the Black community. They can come from the alliances and the relationships and the bridges that we have built. And that is why I can't overemphasize the importance of building bridges, networks, and relationships.
All right. Well, thank you very much, sir. We appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with us, and especially with the young Black Canadians out there. Thank you for being gracious with your time. And hopefully we'll engage again with you in subsequent conversations. We have, issues of concern to us in terms of policies or just in terms of mentorship. So we wanted to thank you for, taking your time off and to sit down with us.
Thank you so much, Gene, and thank you to the United Black Caucus for this opportunity. I look forward to engaging more in the future.
All right, guys, that's it for us with this edition of Conversations in Black. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more Conversation in Black. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey man, yo kakampe.